And can you elaborate on why Willa has two hearts?
The hybridization that occurred in certain genetic lineages led to a more efficient system of storing oxygen in the body for the purpose of accessing higher frequency domains and information. The oxygenation of the body is of paramount importance in speeding up the vibrational resonance of the physical form and having the idea of not exactly two hearts, but more chambers in the heart than you have that makes it function as if it's doubled, allows for a more efficient distribution of oxygen throughout the system, and also a greater amount of oxygen throughout the system that then increases the probability of raising the frequency to the exact pitch required for easier connection to higher frequency realms of consciousness and other dimensions of experience.
So just like when Daryl does deep breathing in order to make the connection with you, the idea is that she has a much higher level of oxygen in her system than we do?
Yes, and this is also why we have mentioned from time to time that there is more oxygen on our planet in the atmosphere. Not a lot, but enough that it allows for the stabilization of that frequency to be common.
Okay. Is there a way that you can support elementals in this time of planetary transition, since they seem to have an important role in keeping the Earth in balance?
Well, in a sense, the idea of taking on the role from your side of keeping the Earth in balance and doing the things that will help stabilize the environment in positive ways, increasing the idea of the natural world and making those connections from your side will be something that will also allow them more opportunity to do so from their side. So the whole idea of making the connection with them and taking actions in your reality that are more representative of enhancing the environment, stabilizing the environment in a more natural way, is what you can do from your side while they do what they do from their side. It's not entirely up to them. This has to be a relationship. It has to be, in a sense, a 50-50 proposition.
It just occurred to me that the connection that elementals experience with Earth and nature is a profoundly deep love affair, in a sense.
Yes.
And that the more that you love Earth and you love all the elements of Earth, the more you are putting yourself in a state that's similar to what an elemental might experience.
Exactly, and therefore, like we have said with regard to extraterrestrial contact, you have to meet them halfway. You have to bring your vibrational frequency at least much closer to the level that they operate on in order for you to perceive them and in order for you to interact with them in the ways that will allow for the acceleration of the balance of the natural world of Earth.
Now, one person had an experience where they were with a grove of trees and suddenly shifted to a parallel reality where they realized that the forest is inhabited with tree people. In other words, the people of the forest are the trees, and that they are a community that has very strong bonds, and they're also very welcoming of the human consciousness.
That's why we say that the trees are, in a sense, the ambassadors between humans and the natural world, because they're connected to the idea of physical humans, they're connected to the idea of the elementals, and in a sense they act as the go-between. So they're always welcoming you into their reality to act as, well, for lack of a better term, brokers between the two different civilizations of human and elemental. That's the common bond That's the common frequency. That's the common interface, are the trees.
So they experience each other as individual consciousnesses
And collective, both.
and a collective at the same time. And they have young people and old people, and it's just it's a community of being.
It is. But again, when you say young people and old people, we understand what you mean in terms of time and the growth of trees. Yeah. But don't assign a human perspective to that, because they don't see it exactly in that way. Remember that they can perceive things in parallel realities in multiple dimensions a little bit differently than you can. And the idea of young and old has a particular perspective to them, but it's not exactly the human perspective.
And yet you need the older trees in a forest in order to share their energy with the younger trees.
Yes, yes. But again, all we're simply saying is the terminology that you're using, the definitions that you're using, have a particular human bent to them that is not experienced exactly in the same way by the tree consciousness.
And one last thing about trees, that they seem to have a very generous spirit in general.
Yes.
And their genetics are actually more complex than ours.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
So they are actually highly evolved beings in many respects.
Yes. In fact, the very idea that they are apparently to you immobile requires the extra genetics and the extra abilities, because they can't move away from things like humans can. Therefore, they have to have more adaptability to a variety of situations, hence a more complex genetic structure.
And they communicate with each other chemically, so they let each other know that there's danger or all kinds of communication.
Yes.
That happens.
Yes, yes.
So it's very sophisticated, and yet it's hidden to human consciousness unless you shift your vibration to be able to perceive what is actually happening.
Yes, but it's not hidden on purpose. It is simply the idea of the limitations that human consciousness has placed on itself, because long ago, when humans were much more connected in their understanding of their expression of nature, it wasn't hidden at all. It was understood very clearly.
So that would be Native Americans, Lemurians, those beings were much more...
Early Atlanteans, yes. And not leaving out the idea of people in other parts of your planet, because many of them also had a more natural way of relating to nature.
Yes, I think almost every continent had its share of shamanic beings that were connecting with nature.
Yes, yes, yes. And it was much more common in those societies to understand those things as natural.
Now, one person has a boa constrictor, and he wants to know how to communicate with that being, and if it's possible to create a relationship and an emotional connection between a reptilian being, and I'm talking about actual reptile, and human.
Well, of course it is. So again, many of the things we've already said will apply as well. The idea of the deep emotional bond, the idea of using imagery instead of words. The reptile will also assist you in understanding exactly how to frame those images, how to frame those emotions in its context, in its quote-unquote language.
So you're basically saying, be the snake, and then you will know how to talk to the snake.
In essence, yes, and the snake will help you if it really senses a deep willingness and a deep bond in your consciousness that wishes to do so. So again, this is why it's so important to have that deep, loving, vibrational, harmonic bond, because then the being will sense that you really desire a connection and will help you with that connection by sending the imagery and the feelings as well that will help you understand how to focus in on its particular way of creating a communication.
Okay, I think that's helpful. Let's see. I'm going to switch over to a question having to do with the precursors.
Yes.
And we wanted to give you an opportunity to clarify the idea of whether precursors were actually born here on the planet or whether they are actually
Yes.
extraterrestrial.
We understand that there may have been a slip in translation when we first talked about that concept. And this is why we have recently begun to talk about people born on the planet who have similar hybridized genetics to precursors as being preparers rather than calling themselves precursors. Precursor, by definition, is something that comes before something else. And therefore, since you're already on the planet, you can't be precursors because you're not coming to the planet, you're on the planet. But you can be preparers. And the preparers can exhibit some of the same vibrational frequencies as the precursors. But precursors are born off the planet. They are hybrids from off the planet, are not born on Earth. Who is born on Earth are preparers. We apologize for any confusion in translation.